What if an injured military dog held a secret capable of saving an entire town? When 72-year-old Eleanor Monroe opens her door during a storm, she never imagines she's about to uncover a deadly conspiracy involving her own nephew. Secrets, betrayal, and redemption in a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Shall we begin? In the sleepy coastal town of Silver Cove, Massachusetts, where salt-weathered clapboard houses dotted the shoreline like pastel sentinels, Eleanor Monroe's morning routine had remained unchanged for nearly 15 years. At 72, her slender fingers, though now gnarled with arthritis, still danced across piano keys with surprising dexterity. The October rain lashed against her bay windows as she finished her morning Bach exercise, the same one she had taught to countless students during her 40-year career at Silver Cove Music Academy. Eleanor was arranging her sheet music when the first crash came from her back porch. Her heart skittered, hand freezing midair. In 15 years of widowhood, she had grown accustomed to the sounds of her Victorian home. This was not one of them. "Hello," she called, her voice thin against the howling nor'easter that had been battering the coast since midnight. The second crash was followed by a whimper, then the unmistakable sound of claws scrambling against her back door. Eleanor clutched her cardigan closer, the lavender wool a poor shield against whatever waited beyond. When she finally mustered the courage to open the door, a massive dark shape lunged past her, leaving her gasping. A German shepherd, soaked and trembling, collapsed in her foyer, panting heavily. Blood smeared across her Persian rug, her mother's final gift before cancer took her. "Oh dear God," Eleanor whispered, kneeling despite her protesting knees. The dog's amber eyes, filled with pain and terror, locked onto hers with startling intelligence. His front paw was mangled, matted with blood and debris. "Where did you come from?" she murmured, tentatively reaching toward him. The dog whimpered but didn't snap. His military-grade collar bore no tags. Eleanor's fingers fumbled with her phone. "Marcus? It's Eleanor Monroe. I need help. There's an injured dog in my house." Dr. Marcus Sullivan's calm voice steadied her. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Ellie. Don't try to move him." As rain pounded her roof, Eleanor sat on the floor beside the trembling animal. "You're safe now," she whispered, not fully understanding why tears pricked her eyes. "I won't let anyone hurt you." She didn't know then that the blood-stained paw prints across her cherished rug marked the beginning of a journey that would unravel every carefully constructed thread of her quiet existence. Nor could she have known that 3 miles away, at the Silver Cove Marina, a black SUV was pulling up. A man in a military-style jacket stepped out, scanning the harbor with calculating precision. He spoke quietly into his phone. "The asset is missing. Last GPS ping came from the North Shore." His gaze settled on the distant outline of Eleanor's Victorian home perched on the bluff. "We'll start the sweep at first light. No one knows what that dog is carrying." The storm intensified as Eleanor Monroe, retired piano teacher and widow, gently stroked the fur of an animal that had just made her a target. The vet clinic smelled of antiseptic and kibble. Eleanor sat rigidly in a plastic chair, her fingers worrying the worn leather strap of her purse. Through the examination room's window, she could see Marcus hunched over the sedated German shepherd, his silver-streaked hair falling across his brow as he worked. After an eternity of waiting, the door swung open. Marcus Sullivan looked more weathered than when they'd last met at the town's summer festival 2 months ago. His green eyes, usually bright with humor, now carried concern. "He's going to be okay, Ellie," Marcus said, dropping into the chair beside her. "But there's something you should know." Eleanor braced herself. "What is it?" "When I scanned him for a microchip, I found military-grade identification." Marcus lowered his voice. "This isn't just any dog. He was part of a Special Forces K-9 unit. Military." Eleanor's mind flashed to the dog's disciplined bearing despite his injury. "But what's he doing here in Silver Cove?" Marcus shrugged, his lab coat crinkling. "That's the mystery. I've put in calls to the proper authorities, but with the storm cutting power lines, everything's delayed." He hesitated. "Ellie, would you consider fostering him until we sort this out? The shelter's at capacity after that condo complex flooded last week." Eleanor's protest died on her lips as Marcus squeezed her hand, a touch that lingered seconds longer than necessary. They'd been classmates at Berklee College of Music decades ago before life pulled them in different directions. I can't, Marcus. I haven't had a pet since Richard died. You live alone in that big house, and with your memory episodes. Marcus caught himself. Eleanor stiffened. I'm managing just fine. Of course you are, he backpedaled. I just think some company might be good for you. This dog is trained to help people. The examination room door opened again, and the assistant led in the German Shepherd, now bandaged and walking gingerly on 3 legs. The dog's eyes immediately found Eleanor. He limped directly to her, resting his massive head on her knee with a soft whine. He's chosen you, Marcus said quietly. That evening, Eleanor's house seemed less empty. She'd named him Maestro. Something about the way he tilted his head when she played piano made it fitting. You should eat something, she told him, setting down a bowl of chicken and rice. As Maestro ate, Eleanor noticed a small scar behind his ear, partially hidden by fur. The phone rang, startling them both. Mrs. Monroe? The voice was unfamiliar. This is Lieutenant Commander James Wilson with Naval Intelligence. I understand you found a military working dog. Eleanor's grip tightened on the receiver. Yes, he's here with me. Ma'am, it's imperative that you secure the animal until our team arrives tomorrow. Under no circumstances should you. The line went dead as thunder cracked overhead and the power failed. In the sudden darkness, Eleanor felt Maestro press against her leg protectively. It's just the storm, she whispered, though an unexplainable dread had settled in her stomach. She lit a candle, illuminating the framed photograph of her son, Alexander, taken before their falling out 5 years ago. She wondered if he was safe in Berlin, if he ever thought of her. As rain battered her windows, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that Maestro's arrival had set something irreversible in motion. Dawn broke with reluctant gray light filtering through Eleanor's lace curtains. The power had returned sometime in the night, but the storm's aftermath was evident in the scattered branches across her yard and the fallen trellis that had once supported her prized climbing roses. Eleanor sat at her Steinway, fingers poised above the keys. She'd slept poorly, dreams filled with shadowy figures and her son Alexander's face. Beside her, Maestro lay on the oriental rug, his ears perking up with each note she played. She began with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the familiar melody flowing from muscle memory. When she reached the middle section, Maestro suddenly sat upright, eyes alert. Eleanor continued playing, watching as the dog's behavior grew increasingly agitated at specific note progressions. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, deliberately replaying the passage. Maestro whined, then limped to the window overlooking the front yard. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Mrs. Monroe? Naval Intelligence. Eleanor smoothed her cardigan and made her way to the entrance. Through the peephole, she saw a clean-cut man in casual attire holding identification. "One moment," she called, unlocking the door while keeping the security chain engaged. "May I see your credentials again, please?" The man, Lieutenant Wilson according to his ID, smiled tightly. "Ma'am, I need to see the dog." Something in his demeanor made Eleanor hesitate. "He's resting. The vet said he shouldn't be moved. I understand your concern, but this is a matter of national security." Wilson's smile never reached his eyes. "That dog was part of an operation. He needs to be debriefed." "Debriefed?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "He's a dog, Lieutenant." "Figure of speech, ma'am. May I come in?" Behind her, Maestro growled low in his throat. "I think it would be better if you returned with proper documentation from Dr. Sullivan," Eleanor said firmly. "He's overseeing the dog's care." Wilson's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Monroe, I don't think you understand. Good morning." A cheerful voice called from the sidewalk. Eleanor's neighbor, Vivian Taylor, approached with a casserole dish. "Ellie, I brought you my famous tuna noodle after that awful power outage." Wilson stepped back. "I'll be in touch, Mrs. Monroe." He retreated to a black sedan parked across the street. Vivian bustled past Eleanor into the house. At 68, she remained Silver Cove's most notorious gossip, her salt and pepper bob bouncing as she moved. "Who was that?" Vivian's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Finally getting back in the dating pool?" "Hardly," Eleanor muttered, watching Wilson's car pull away. "Just someone asking questions about the dog." Vivian spotted Maestro and gasped. "Ellie Monroe, since when do you have a dog?" "Wait until I tell the Wednesday ladies. They'll never believe it." "It's temporary," Eleanor explained, accepting the casserole, just until his owner is located. Vivian peered at Maestro more closely. He looks like those military dogs on the History Channel. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. You know what they say about Silver Cove being selected for that climate summit next month? Secret Service has been all over town preparing. After Vivian left, Eleanor returned to her piano, thoughtfully playing the passage that had agitated Maestro earlier. This time, she noticed something peculiar. The dog responded specifically to a sequence that formed a distinct pattern. 3 notes, pause, for notes, pause, 3 notes. It's like a code, she whispered, repeating the sequence. Maestro barked once, as if in confirmation. Eleanor glanced at the sedan still visible at the end of her street, then at the phone. She should call Marcus, tell him about the strange visitor. Instead, her fingers dialed a number she knew by heart, but hadn't called in 5 years. The international ringtone sounded hollow before connecting to voicemail. You've reached Alexander Monroe. Leave a message. Eleanor closed her eyes, listening to her son's voice. When the beep came, she simply said, Alex, it's Mom. Something strange is happening here. I miss you. She hung up, unaware that 3,000 miles away in Berlin, Alexander Monroe was already booking a flight home. The farmers' market bustled with Saturday morning activity. Tents lined Silver Cove's historic Main Street, vendors calling out prices for heirloom tomatoes and local honey. Eleanor navigated the crowd carefully, Maestro limping beside her on a borrowed leash. His injuries were healing well, but he remained vigilant, ears constantly swiveling at the slightest sounds. Eleanor Monroe with a dog. Now I've seen everything, remarked Gerald Hartley, the retired postmaster who delivered her mail for 30 years. His weathered face crinkled with amusement beneath his Patriot's cap. Just temporary, Gerald, Eleanor replied, examining a basket of Macintosh apples. That's what Sarah said when she took in that stray cat. 10 years later, the darn thing still sleeps on her pillow. Gerald chuckled. Say, you coming to the town hall meeting Monday? Mayor's announcing details about that climate conference. Supposed to put Silver Cove on the map. Eleanor nodded absently, her attention caught by a man standing near the artisanal cheese display. Late 40s, military straight posture, watchful eyes. When their gazes met, he quickly turned away. Gerald, do you know that man by the cheese stand? Gerald squinted. Can't say I do. Tourist, probably. Maestro tensed suddenly, his focus locked on the stranger. Eleanor felt the leash go taut as the dog pulled forward, his behavior shifting from alert to purposeful. Maestro, heel, she commanded, surprised when he immediately obeyed. The military training was evident in his response. She worked her way toward the cheese stand, but the man was gone. Maestro sniffed the ground where he had stood, whining softly. What is it, boy? Eleanor whispered. Did you know him? Beautiful dog, said a voice behind her. Eleanor turned to find a woman with silver-streaked black hair and intelligent eyes. Her press badge read, Catherine Winters, Silver Cove Gazette. Thank you, Eleanor replied cautiously. German Shepherd, right? Looks like he might have military training. Catherine's casual tone belied her intense scrutiny. I'm doing a piece on service animals for next week's edition. Mind if I ask a few questions? Another time, perhaps, Eleanor said. We were just leaving. The reporter smiled. Of course. I should mention, I knew your son in college. Journalism program at Boston University. Alex had real talent. Eleanor stiffened. You knew Alexander? We shared several classes. Catherine handed her a business card. If you change your mind about that interview, call me. Or if you ever want to talk about Alex. Eleanor slipped the card into her pocket, unsettled by the encounter. As she and Maestro headed home along Harbor Street, she noticed the black sedan from yesterday parked across from her favorite bookshop. No sign of Lieutenant Wilson, but the vehicle's presence was unmistakable. That afternoon, as 7-year-old Lily Palmer practiced Fur Elise in Eleanor's living room, Maestro lay watchfully by the piano. Eleanor had resumed teaching a few neighborhood children since retiring from the academy, a way to stay connected to her craft and the community. Miss Eleanor, your dog keeps staring at me, Lily giggled. He appreciates good music, Eleanor smiled. Try the passage again, dear. Remember to let your wrist relax on the arpeggios. The lesson was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass from upstairs. Maestro bolted to his feet, a deep growl rumbling in his chest. Stay here, Lily. Eleanor ordered, grabbing her phone. She dialed 911, but heard only a busy signal. Heart pounding, she took the fireplace poker and slowly ascended the stairs, Maestro limping ahead determinedly despite his injury. The guest bedroom window was shattered, glass fragments glittering on the hardwood floor. Wind billowed the curtains inward, but there was no sign of an intruder. Eleanor approached cautiously, Maestro scanning the room with military precision. On the windowsill lay a small metal pin, an insignia she didn't recognize. Below, her award-winning begonia garden had been trampled, crushing months of careful cultivation. "They're gone now," she assured Lily's worried parents 20 minutes later as police took photos of the damage. "Probably teenagers." But as Officer Jensen examined the metal pin, his expression changed. "Mrs. Monroe, this is a Naval Special Warfare insignia, not something kids would typically carry." That night, Eleanor placed the business card from Catherine Winters beside her telephone and stared at it for a long time. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle at first, then building to a steady rhythm that matched her growing unease. In her garden, illuminated briefly by lightning, a dark figure moved between the rhododendrons before disappearing into the stormy darkness. Dr. Marcus Sullivan's office smelled of antiseptic and the faint hint of peppermint he always kept in his desk drawer. Eleanor sat across from him, hands folded tightly in her lap as he examined the file on his computer. "The blood work looks good," Marcus said, the glow of the monitor reflecting in his glasses. "Maestro's healing remarkably well." He leaned back in his chair, studying Eleanor with the careful gaze he reserved for his most concerning patients. "Now, tell me again about this break-in." Eleanor recounted the incident, ending with the military insignia. Marcus's expression darkened. "And you said this Lieutenant Wilson never came back?" "No, but that black sedan appears everywhere I go." Eleanor hesitated. "Marcus, there's something else. I researched that insignia. It belongs to a unit specializing in explosive detection and search and rescue operations." Marcus removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Ellie, I should tell you something. When I scanned Maestro's chip, I received a classified alert. I didn't tell you everything because I wasn't supposed to know." His voice dropped. The dog was part of a specialized unit attached to counterterrorism operations. His handler. Marcus paused. "His handler was killed 3 weeks ago." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "Killed. The details are classified, but apparently there was an operation that went sideways. The official record shows Maestro was also presumed lost." Outside the window, Silver Cove sparkled in the late October sunshine. The marina was unusually busy, boats being polished and repaired in preparation for the upcoming climate conference. "There's more," Marcus continued reluctantly. "I have a buddy from my Navy days who works in intelligence now. He said there's chatter about missing intelligence that was supposed to be recovered during that operation, and they think Maestro has it." Eleanor's voice was barely audible. "Either has it or knows where it is." Marcus reached across the desk, taking her hand. "Ellie, I'm worried about you. First the break-in, now these people following you. Maybe you should stay with me until this blows over." Eleanor withdrew her hand gently. "I can't leave my home, Marcus." "Still as stubborn as you were at Berkeley," he smiled sadly. "Remember when Professor Gaines said you'd never master Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto, and you practiced until your fingers bled?" The memory brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. "That was a lifetime ago." "Not to me," he said quietly. The silence between them was heavy with decades of unspoken feelings, paths not taken. Eleanor's phone chimed with a text notification. It was from her nephew, Mayor Robert Monroe. "Important town meeting tomorrow. Climate conference security briefing. Your presence requested." "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. "Robert wants me at tomorrow's town meeting. Something about the conference." Marcus's expression turned serious. "The governor and 3 senators will be attending, plus delegates from 12 countries. Silver Cove's never seen security like this." He hesitated. "Ellie, has Maestro shown any unusual behavior around your piano?" Eleanor stared at him. "How did you know?" His handler was a pianist. They developed a musical code system for covert operations. If Maestro is responding to certain notes. Marcus left the implication hanging. On the drive home, Eleanor noticed the black sedan 2 cars behind. Instead of turning toward her Victorian, she made a split-second decision, steering toward the public library. Inside, She found Catherine Winters in the periodicals section. Mrs. Monroe, the journalist, looked up in surprise. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. You said you knew my son, Eleanor said without preamble. I need to know everything about him that I don't. Catherine's expression softened with understanding. Let's talk somewhere private. As they moved toward the library's quiet room, Eleanor glanced back through the window. Lieutenant Wilson stood by the entrance, watching. The library's quiet room was a wood-paneled sanctuary smelling of old books and furniture polish. Catherine settled into a worn leather armchair, watching Eleanor with journalist's eyes, observant, calculating, yet not unkind. You should know, Catherine began, that Alex never spoke badly of you. Eleanor's fingers tightened around her handbag. Then why hasn't he contacted me in 5 years? Catherine sighed. He thought it was safer that way. Safer. The word hung in the air between them. Mrs. Monroe, your son isn't just a journalist. After Boston University, he was recruited by an intelligence agency. Catherine leaned forward. His cover is as a foreign correspondent, but his actual work is sensitive. Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly. She steadied herself against the chair arm. That's absurd. Alexander writes about European politics for the International Tribune. Yes, and he's quite good at it. Catherine smiled thinly. That's what makes his cover so effective. Through the glass panel in the door, Eleanor could see Maestro lying patiently in the main reading room where she'd left him with the elderly librarian, Mrs. Patel. The dog's eyes remained fixed on Eleanor, alert even in repose. How do you know all this? Eleanor asked. Because I work for the same agency. Catherine pulled out her phone, showing Eleanor a different ID than her press badge. We're concerned about what's happening here in Silver Cove. Eleanor stared at the credential, her world rearranging itself. The climate conference? Partially, but mostly about what Maestro was carrying when he found you. Catherine's voice dropped. His handler, Captain David Reeves, was investigating a domestic terrorist cell planning an attack during the conference. He uncovered evidence implicating several high-profile individuals, including someone in Silver Cove's administration. Eleanor thought of her nephew Robert, his desperate ambition for re-election, his sudden wealth last year attributed to smart investments. Before Reeves could transmit his findings, his cover was blown. He managed to encode the intelligence into Maestro's training before he was killed. Catherine studied Eleanor's reaction. The dog escaped with the information, encoded somehow in his behavior patterns. The piano, Eleanor whispered. He reacts to specific note sequences. Catherine nodded. Captain Reeves was an accomplished pianist. He trained Maestro using musical cues as fail-safe communication. A commotion outside interrupted them. Through the glass, Eleanor saw Lieutenant Wilson showing his credentials to Mrs. Patel, pointing toward the quiet room. Maestro was on his feet, hackles raised. We need to leave, Catherine said urgently. Wilson isn't naval intelligence. He's working for the people Reeves was investigating. How do I know you're telling the truth? Eleanor demanded. Catherine held her gaze. Alex has your mother's antique metronome on his desk in Berlin. He winds it every night before bed, a ritual you taught him. The personal detail, something no one could know unless Alexander had shared it, settled like a stone in Eleanor's chest. There's a back exit through the reference section, Eleanor said, rising shakily. As they slipped out, Eleanor glimpsed Wilson's frustrated face as Mrs. Patel deliberately delayed him, dropping her stack of catalog cards across the floor. Outside, slate-colored clouds threatened rain. Catherine led them down an alley behind Main Street shops. I've contacted Alex, Catherine said. He's on his way home. Alexander is coming here? Eleanor's voice caught. He'd never stay away knowing you're in danger. Catherine checked her watch. We need somewhere safe until he arrives. Eleanor thought of her previous memory episode last week, how she'd found herself confused in the town square, unsure how she'd gotten there. How Maestro had gently guided her home, nudging her back to reality. The diagnosis she'd hidden from everyone. Early-stage dementia, progressive and irreversible. My house isn't safe, Eleanor said, but I know somewhere they won't look. As they hurried toward the old boathouse at the far end of the marina, Eleanor felt the weight of her unsent letters to Alexander. Years of explanations and apologies hidden in her desk drawer, confessions about the family secret that had driven him away. The truth about his father's connection to Silver Cove's darkest chapter. Behind them, Wilson's voice called out, sharp with authority. Maestro growled, placing himself protectively between Eleanor and the approaching footsteps. The old boathouse belonged to Eleanor's late husband's family for generations. Perched on stilts at the edge of the harbor, its weathered gray shingles blended with the misty horizon. Inside, fishing equipment from decades past hung from rafters, and the faint smell of salt, wood rot, and motor oil permeated every surface. "No one comes here anymore," Eleanor explained, lighting the old kerosene lamp. Shadows danced across the walls as she moved deeper into the space. Richard planned to restore it before he died. "The town thinks it's condemned." Catherine secured the door behind them. "We should be safe until morning." Maestro limped to a moldy rug by the window overlooking the water, circling 3 times before settling, his eyes never leaving Eleanor. "You should try to rest," Catherine suggested, checking her weapon discreetly. "Tomorrow will be difficult." Eleanor sat on a dusty crate, fatigue suddenly overwhelming her. "My memory," she began hesitantly. "It's not reliable anymore. The doctors say it will get worse." Catherine's expression softened. "Alex mentioned you were having episodes. That's partly why he stayed away. He couldn't bear watching and not being able to help." "He knows?" Eleanor's voice broke. "He's known for about 2 years. One of your students, Emily, I think. She's his contact here. She's been keeping an eye on you." Eleanor thought of sweet Emily Foster, now teaching at the music academy, who visited every Sunday with fresh-baked muffins and endless patience. "All this time, I thought he hated me for what happened with his father." Catherine hesitated. "Mrs. Monroe, what exactly did happen with Richard?" Alex never explained fully. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached into her cardigan pocket, removing a folded photograph. It showed a much younger Richard Monroe receiving an award, standing beside a smiling woman who wasn't Eleanor. "My husband had another family," she said quietly, "in Portland, for 15 years. The revelation hung in the damp air. When Alexander discovered the truth, he confronted his father. Richard had a heart attack during their argument. He died 3 days later." Eleanor's voice grew distant. "Alexander blamed himself. Then he blamed me for keeping Richard's secret all those years." "Why did you?" Catherine asked gently. "Silver Cove worshipped Richard Monroe. His family founded this town. The annual water festival celebrates his grandfather's rescue of 17 fishermen during the storm of 48. Eleanor's bitter laugh held decades of pain. "I couldn't tarnish that legacy. Not until I found evidence that the rescue was a lie. Richard's grandfather actually caused that shipwreck. He was smuggling liquor during Prohibition." A sudden noise outside made them both freeze. Maestro was instantly alert, moving to the door with a low growl. Catherine drew her weapon. "Stay back." The door crashed open. Lieutenant Wilson stood silhouetted against the night sky, gun aimed at Catherine. "Federal agent," Catherine announced coldly. "Lower your weapon." Wilson's laugh held no humor. "You're outnumbered, Winters." Behind him, 2 more figures emerged from the darkness. "The dog and the old lady are coming with me." "James Wilson doesn't exist." Catherine kept her gun steady. "Who are you really working for?" "Someone who understands opportunity," he replied. "Silver Cove is about to become very important, the gateway for a new kind of importation business. We just need to eliminate some obstacles first." Eleanor's mind raced. The harbor expansion Robert had been pushing, the mysterious investors, the environmental protests that had mysteriously stopped after their leader disappeared last month. "The climate conference is a cover," Eleanor realized aloud. "You're planning something during the event." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Smart old lady. Too smart to keep around." He gestured to his men. "Bring her. Kill the agent." What happened next unfolded with dreamlike clarity. Maestro launched himself at Wilson with explosive force, his injured legs seemingly forgotten. The gun discharged, the bullet splintering the wooden wall inches from Eleanor's head. Catherine tackled one of the other men as Eleanor scrambled for the back door leading to the dock. Outside, rain began to fall in earnest. Eleanor's feet slipped on the wet planks as she ran, her breath coming in painful gasps. Behind her, more gunshots punctuated the storm's rumble. "Eleanor!" Catherine's voice called through the downpour. "Run!" As Eleanor reached the marina's main pier, lights from town illuminated a figure walking quickly toward her. The silhouette was achingly familiar, tall and slender like his father, but with her own determined gait. "Alexander," she whispered, heart threatening to burst. Her son's face emerged from the rain-swept darkness, older and more weathered than she remembered, but his eyes, her eyes, unchanged. "Mom," he said simply, enfolding her in an embrace that bridged 5 years of silence. The safe house was a modest Cape Cod on the outskirts of town, owned by a shell company Alexander wouldn't name. Rain lashed against the windows as Eleanor sat wrapped in a blanket, watching her son's familiar movements as he made tea in the small kitchen. Maestro lay at her feet, his injured paw re-bandaged after the confrontation at the boathouse. Catherine was on the phone in the next room, her voice a low, urgent murmur. The third person in their escape party, a tall, taciturn man Alexander had introduced simply as Decker, stood guard by the front window, occasionally checking the perimeter. "2 sugars, right?" Alexander asked, handing her a steaming mug. At 43, his once boyish features had sharpened, lines etched around his eyes and mouth. A thin scar ran along his jawline, new since she'd last seen him. "You remember," Eleanor said softly. "I remember everything, Mom." He sat opposite her, his posture tense. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long." Eleanor studied her son's face, cataloging the changes time had wrought. "Catherine told me what you really do. All this time, I thought you were just a journalist." Alexander's smile was tired. "I am a journalist. The other work came later." He glanced at Maestro. "Captain Reeves was my friend. We trained together. The dog recognized your scent," Eleanor realized. "That first day at the farmer's market. He wasn't tracking the man watching us. He was trying to reach you." Alexander nodded. "I've been in Silver Cove for 2 weeks, investigating the same group Reeves was tracking. I couldn't contact you directly. It would have put you in more danger." "But why send Maestro to me?" Eleanor asked. "I didn't. That was Reeves's doing." Alexander leaned forward. "Mom, Reeves knew about your background before I ever met him." "My background? I'm a piano teacher." Alexander exchanged glances with Catherine, who had entered silently. "Tell her," Catherine encouraged. "During the Cold War, before you met Dad, you worked for a government program coding classified communications into musical compositions," Alexander said gently. "Pieces that sounded like ordinary classical music but contained embedded messages that could be decoded with the right key." Eleanor's hand trembled, spilling tea onto the blanket. The room seemed suddenly too bright, too loud. "I was a music student," she protested. "I never." But even as she denied it, fragmented memories surfaced. A different office, younger versions of herself transcribing notes on a staff paper, a stern man in wire-rimmed glasses reviewing her work. "Project Harmony," she whispered, the classified name emerging from some locked compartment in her mind. "Yes," Alexander confirmed. "Your work was instrumental in several critical Cold War operations. When you left the program, they performed a memory suppression protocol, standard procedure then. But they knew memory suppression isn't perfect, especially with age and certain cognitive conditions." "My dementia," Eleanor said numbly. "It's breaking down the suppression." Catherine sat beside her. "Reeves discovered your connection while researching musical encoding methods for his own operation. When he was compromised, he programmed Maestro with a sequence he knew only someone with your training could recognize and decode." "The piano patterns," Eleanor murmured. "They seemed familiar somehow, but I couldn't place why." Alexander took her hands. "Mom, we need your help. The people behind this plot have infiltrated local law enforcement and government. They're planning to use the climate conference as cover for something bigger. We think a major drug smuggling operation using diplomatic immunity channels. But we need proof of who's involved." "Robert," Eleanor said, naming her nephew. "He's part of it, isn't he?" The pained look on Alexander's face confirmed her suspicion. "The evidence is in Maestro's training," Catherine explained. "Encoded in the specific musical patterns he responds to. With your background, you might be the only person who can extract it fully." Eleanor closed her eyes, overwhelmed. When she opened them, her gaze fell on the piano in the corner of the room. A simple upright, nothing like her Steinway. "I'll need my own piano," she said firmly. "The one Richard gave me for our 20th anniversary. The touch, the tone, my fingers know it intimately." Alexander frowned. "It's too dangerous to go back to the house." "Then bring it here," Eleanor replied, a steely determination replacing her shock. "If I'm going to remember who I was, who I really was, I'll need every advantage." As if understanding the gravity of her decision, Maestro rose and placed his head on her knee, eyes meeting hers with silent solidarity. Outside, thunder rolled across Silver Cove, a storm front colliding with the one brewing inside Eleanor Monroe's awakening memory. Dawn broke over Silver Cove with reluctant clarity, the storm having passed, but leaving behind a leaden sky and debris-strewn streets. In the safe house, Eleanor sat before her Steinway, which Alexander's team had somehow transported during the night. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly as fragments of her past continued to surface like driftwood after a tempest. "Take your time," Alexander said, his voice gentle. The strain of the past 24 hours had deepened the lines around his eyes, yet seeing him this way, protective, present, filled a void Eleanor had carried for 5 years. The technique was called auditory cryptography, Eleanor explained, her voice distant as memories crystallized. "We encoded information into musical phrases using mathematical algorithms that sounded natural to the untrained ear." Catherine sat nearby, digital recording equipment ready. "And you believe Reeves used a similar method with Maestro?" "Not similar," Eleanor corrected. "Identical. He must have discovered my old classified files." She placed her hands on the keys and began to play a simple C major scale. Maestro, lying by the piano, remained still. Eleanor shifted to a G minor arpeggio. Again, no response. "What about the sequence he reacted to at your house?" Alexander prompted. Eleanor closed her eyes, remembering. Her fingers found the notes, a complex pattern that seemed random but followed a structure she now recognized. Immediately, Maestro sat upright, eyes alert. "There," she whispered. She continued playing, watching as the dog's behavior changed with specific progressions, sometimes alert, sometimes anxious, sometimes utterly still. "He's the receiving unit," Eleanor realized. Reeves encoded the information but made Maestro the key to accessing it. Each behavioral response corresponds to different data points. For 2 hours, Eleanor played variations on the theme, while Catherine and Alexander documented every reaction. Decker came and went, checking security and bringing updates on Wilson's men, who had been spotted searching the marina. "The town meeting starts at noon," Decker reminded them. "If we're right about the timeline, whatever they're planning happens today." Eleanor's fingers faltered on the keys, a dissonant chord interrupting the pattern. "I need a break," she said, rubbing her temples. The effort of recovering suppressed memories while battling her condition had left her exhausted. In the kitchen, Alexander handed her a glass of water and 2 pills. "Your medication," he explained. "Emily told us your schedule." Eleanor swallowed them, studying her son's face. "All these years, you've been watching over me from a distance. I thought it was safer for you," Alexander said, regret evident in his voice. "After Dad died, after what I said to you, I couldn't face coming back. Then when I learned about your diagnosis, you were angry." Eleanor finished for him. "You had every right to be. I kept your father's secrets for decades." Alexander leaned against the counter, suddenly looking very young despite his years. "I didn't understand then. Loyalty, compromise, the gray areas we live in." He met her eyes. "My work has taught me there are rarely perfect choices, only necessary ones." Eleanor reached for his hand, noting how it dwarfed hers now. "Your father loved you, Alexander. Despite everything, despite his other family, his love for you was never a lie." "I know that now," he said quietly. "Just like I know you were trying to protect me by keeping his secret." From the living room, Maestro barked sharply. They turned to find the dog standing at the window, hackles raised. Decker appeared in the doorway, expression grim. 2 SUVs just pulled up at the end of the street. "Wilson found us." Catherine emerged from the back room. "I've got most of it decoded. Names, dates, locations, enough to prove the conspiracy." "We need to move," Decker urged, checking his weapon. "The town meeting," Eleanor said suddenly. "That's where they'll make their move. With everyone gathered, the mayor, police chief, conference security detail, they'll have all their people in one place." Alexander's face hardened with decision. "Mom, you and Maestro stay here with Decker. Catherine and I will take what we have to my federal contact." "No." Eleanor stood, straightening to her full height. Despite her age and illness, in that moment she exuded a quiet authority that silenced the room. "Maestro and I are going to that meeting. You need me to finish the decoding, and more importantly, Robert will suspect something if I'm not there. It's too dangerous, Alexander protested. Eleanor fixed him with the steady gaze that had intimidated piano students for 4 decades. I spent my life hiding behind other people's expectations, Alexander. I won't hide now when it matters most. Outside, car doors slammed. Time had run out for debate. The back exit, Decker directed, already moving. There's a service road that cuts through to the town hall. As they slipped out the rear door, Eleanor took one last look at her beloved piano. Like so many things in her life, she was leaving it behind. But this time, she was running towards something, not away. Silver Cove's town hall stood as it had for 2 centuries, a white clapboard building with black shutters and a copper weather vane shaped like a sailing ship. Inside the main chamber, mahogany pews faced a raised platform where Mayor Robert Monroe addressed the assembled townspeople, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a politician born to the role. At 42, Robert resembled his uncle Richard, the same square jaw and confident posture, though his eyes lacked Richard's warmth. Behind him sat Silver Cove's council members and visiting security officials preparing for the climate conference. This summit puts our town on the global stage, Robert proclaimed, gesturing expansively. The harbor expansion project will accommodate diplomatic vessels and create local jobs for years to come. Eleanor slipped through the side entrance with Maestro, Alexander close behind. They took seats in the back row as Catherine positioned herself near the emergency exit. Decker had disappeared to secure the perimeter. Robert faltered momentarily when he spotted his aunt, surprise flickering across his features before his politician's smile reasserted itself. The additional security measures may cause some inconvenience, he continued, but Chief Hawkins assures me they're necessary for an event of this magnitude. Police Chief Hawkins, a heavy-set man with thinning hair and 30 years on the force, nodded solemnly from his seat near the platform. Eleanor noticed how his hand kept straying to his collar, adjusting it nervously. As Robert detailed road closures and security checkpoints, Eleanor leaned toward Alexander. The tall man in the gray suit by the window. That's the investor Robert's been courting for the harbor project. Alexei Volkov, Alexander whispered back. Russian business interests, suspected ties to trafficking operations. He's on several watch lists. Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The pieces were aligning with terrifying clarity. They're using the diplomatic security protocols to smuggle something in, she murmured. The expanded harbor gives them direct access to shipping lanes without typical customs scrutiny. Robert concluded his presentation to polite applause. Any questions before we adjourn? Eleanor rose slowly to her feet. All eyes turned toward her, the respected widow of Richard Monroe, former pillar of Silver Cove Society. I have a question about the funding sources for the harbor expansion, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Particularly Mr. Volkov's contribution and the unusual routing of funds through offshore accounts. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Robert's face flushed crimson. Aunt Eleanor, this isn't the appropriate forum for. I think it's exactly the right forum. Eleanor interrupted, moving toward the center aisle with Maestro at her side. Before this town commits to a project that will forever alter our coastline, shouldn't citizens know who's really behind it? Chief Hawkins stood, hand moving toward his holster. Mrs. Monroe, you should sit down. Eleanor noticed Lieutenant Wilson slipping in through the main entrance, scanning for her. The climate conference is being used as cover, she continued, raising her voice to be heard over the growing commotion. Diplomatic immunity will shield certain shipments from inspection. I have evidence. She's confused, Robert cut in smoothly. My aunt has been experiencing health issues. Memory problems. Eleanor felt the familiar fog threatening at the edges of her consciousness. The disorientation that had become her unwelcome companion. She gripped the pew in front of her, breathing deeply. Play the notes, Alexander whispered urgently behind her. Eleanor began to hum the specific musical sequence they had decoded at the safe house. Almost immediately, Maestro barked sharply 3 times and turned toward Chief Hawkins, his training activating with precision. Catherine moved suddenly, intercepting Wilson as he reached for his weapon. In the ensuing chaos, Alexander stepped forward with his credentials. Federal agent, he announced. Everyone stay calm. He nodded to Decker, who appeared with 3 uniformed officers, agents from outside Silver Cove's compromise department. Robert Monroe, Lawrence Hawkins, and Alexei Volkov. You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and planning a terrorist act on American soil." The room erupted. Through the confusion, Eleanor found herself facing her nephew. Robert's handsome face contorted with rage and something else, fear. "You don't understand what you've done," he hissed. "They'll kill me for this." For an instant, Eleanor saw the little boy who had once followed her around at family gatherings, begging for piano lessons. How had that child become this man? "I understand exactly what I've done," she replied softly. "I've chosen truth, finally." As federal agents secured the suspects, Marcus Sullivan appeared at Eleanor's side, medical bag in hand. His worried eyes searched her face. "You incredible, reckless woman," he said, voice breaking. "Are you all right?" Eleanor smiled, suddenly very tired. "I think I will be." Outside, autumn sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating Silver Cove's harbor. Eleanor stood on the town hall steps with Maestro, watching as boats rocked gently at their moorings. The same view that had greeted her for 72 years, yet somehow transformed by the events of the past week. Alexander joined her, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. "Ready to go home?" Home. The word held new meaning now. "Yes," Eleanor said, reaching down to scratch Maestro behind the ears. "All of us." As they walked down the steps together, Eleanor realized some memories, even those long buried or fading, never truly disappear. They simply wait for the right moment to resurface, like buried treasure revealed by a shifting tide. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you watched all the way through, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.